Yeah, for today, I'm really excited to introduce Dr. Brett, Dr. Connie Brett to be exact. So she is the CEO for Aggregate Genius, which is actually right here in BC. So if you're looking for really cool local companies to work for, I think that's a really good one to keep an eye out for. She is experienced in using a lot of different types of data models and algorithms and architecting these really big solutions for different clients and companies. And I think that's really cool because when we look at data science, it's mostly strictly working with clients and doing that sort of consulting and architecting solutions. So if you have any questions about that, I'm sure that she would be happy to answer that and go through her career with you if that's of interest to you. She's also worked with really big data analytics platforms and has a lot of experience with them, like Python and R and Java and just like a million different things that we never really thought to explore in. She has also published a lot, so she has a lot of academic experience. She's also written patents and contributes and maintains different R packages. So one of them that we'll be talking about today is Periscope and different frameworks as well. She is also an open source contributor and likes to speak and make herself available to the community through these sort of events. This is not her first RLadies run, and she's super active in the community. So yeah, she has had an amazing breadth of experience at 20 years. I mean, that is pretty insane and it's super hard to beat. So there's a lot of experience here. I would really suggest that if you're interested in any of the work that she does, to kind of reach out because it's really hard to find people available with that kind of experience who's actually super nice and awesome like Connie is. But yeah, if there's anything else that you want to add, definitely feel free to do so, but I'm going to be passing the torch on to her now.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lisa, for that kind introduction. I really appreciate that. And I totally reiterate, please do reach out to me. If you want to talk about my career, you want to talk about how I got here, the long winding journey, I'm not going to bore everybody. But just to kind of give you a little bit of a tidbit, Lisa introduced me as Dr. Connie Brett. My doctorate is in computational chemistry. So I did analytics before it was cool. It was just science. And so that's kind of where my background goes way back to. So with that, I will start our presentation, but I'm always happy to connect with local people and share my experience because others that shared with me, kind of brought me to where I'm at. So I'm always happy to do that. So let me go ahead and share my screen. So you should see my PowerPoint. Don't worry, there are less than 10 slides of content. So I am not a big PowerPoint person. We're going to do a bunch of hands-on. So as Lisa mentioned, I'm Connie, and I'm the CEO of a small business. We do global analytics solutions called Aggregate Genius Inc. We're actually located on Salt Spring Island. If you're in the local area, you kind of know where that is at. If not, we're in the Victoria area, but kind of between Victoria and Vancouver. So we have global teams. We're completely virtual. We have clients around the world and team members around the world, and we're very fortunate to have survived the pandemic. So happy to share this with you. We're going to talk about enterprise-worthy, shiny applications and creating them with a package called Periscope. So I wanted to give a little bit of background and a little bit of conversation about why we use Shiny, and from two standpoints. One is a stakeholder and another is an analyst. So a stakeholder would be a user of the application, and they love Shiny because it lets them explore and visualize data and analysis, because that's what they want to do. And in most Shiny apps, they can usually perform some sort of other ad hoc analysis as allowed by the author. They can also generally self-serve these applications. They don't require a whole IT department behind them to set them up or licensing or things like that. So generally the support costs are pretty low from an enterprise standpoint. And of course, the whole reason we use them, stakeholders love for the same reason. It facilitates better communication about data sets and analyses. So you've probably guessed what's going to go in the analyst column from a person who makes Shiny applications. Why do we use it versus something else? And it really gives us a single platform, a single language for analysis, reporting, and development, which are three very important aspects of the analyst job. These Shiny applications are invaluable and complementary, and usually they're complementary in addition to things like static reports that management needs. And it lets analysts produce fewer or more focused final reports because their stakeholders can explore that data and provide them with good feedback without the back and forth that's required if you have to change a report over and over again. So that's some of the reasons we see Shiny being adopted, not just by research groups and university groups or open source communities, but also by enterprises. Their stakeholders and their analysts are starting to use R and Shiny, and it's really, really taking off inside of the enterprise. So everyone's like, great, this is an awesome tool. So what's the problem? Well, there's always a problem. There's always a plus and a minus. So from a development standpoint, when you're making a Shiny app, especially if you're just getting started, there are a lot of examples out there on the web that are very simple and they're very focused, which is great when you're learning. If you need to learn how to put a button or style something, those are very great examples. However, most applications that we make in an enterprise are very, very large and much more complicated. From a development standpoint, every UI element has to be styled, right? You have to know how to put it in the application and how to implement it, as well as how to style it. So there's a lot of reinventing the wheel that goes on, even if you're an experienced developer. For instance, every time I have to create a button with a multiple choice dropdown that does multiple things, I have to go look up how to do it. And I've done this for years. Debugging can be really hard in Shiny. If you've debugged reactivity and scope, you realize this. Modules make things even more complicated to debug. And of course, the more you add onto an application, the bigger it gets, the harder it is to debug. In addition to that, there's kind of a plus and a minus to Shiny in that each app is developed for a specific need. So you develop an app with a point. The point is to show someone something or let them explore in a certain way. So the content of the app, the actual stuff that goes in the app is very different between apps and departments and people and even just contexts, right? A financial app that's detecting fraud might be very, very different on the inside from a biological app that's showing a genome. So each app is very unique. And then you get to the deployment, and that's the part where you're getting it to the user. So there's scoping issues, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this because it's super important. And it's not obvious or well managed in Shiny. And in fact, if you've never heard about scope or talked about scope in Shiny before, I wouldn't be surprised. And this is what leads to most of the things that, when you're testing locally, it works on my machine. And then you deploy it and it doesn't work or behave correctly when multiple people use it. Incorrect implementations are also dangerous. They can tie up resources unnecessarily or cause data corruption. And the last thing you want to do is mess up your data. There's also consistency issues. When you think of an enterprise or even a medium-sized company, you have different workflows. Different apps may lead you through a process in different ways. You have different looks and feels, right? The sky's the limit with Shiny and with R, and there's many ways to do the same exact thing. So even something simple like a download button might be put in a different location, or it might look and feel different to the user. And then of course, if you have consistency issues, you have to do much more training of your users. They need to learn how to use app A and how to use app B and how to use app C. They're not consistent at all. So in addressing these types of downfalls, I need to talk to you about scope. So like I mentioned, not many people will have talked about scope in a Shiny app, and it's really actually very, very important. So I've got a diagram here on the right, and we're going to just talk about the various scopes. So the global scope, that red box on the left, it is global, as you might imagine, as its name is. And it's accessible to all of the other scopes and the UI. So that little blue UI box down at the bottom is where your UI scope is. That's just the files that hold the UI definitions in a Shiny app. But the global scope is accessible to everything. It is also not present when you have a two-file app. So if you have a server and a UI app where it just has server.r and UI.r, you actually don't have a global scope. There's nothing that goes between those two files, but it is present when you have a global.r file. The next scope down, you can think of it, even less global, is called the session global scope, sometimes referred to as a server global. And so that's the yellow box on the right. And it's accessible to all of the sessions, which are green, and it sees all of the global variables, but the UI scope does not interact with it. So those two are separate. And if you're thinking of a two-file app where you have a server.r file, it is outside of that server function. So that server function, if you put something above it, it is in this session global scope. And then we have these green ones on the right. These are session locals. And these are a single instance. I used to say user, now I say instance, because of course we can have so many different browser tabs open, but every time you open it in a Shiny app, that is a new instance. And that is where like all the special stuff happens, right? So that scope is your user only scope. If they push a button and it does something, if it's in that scope, it's only doing it for the user. And so that is the code that you put inside the server function. And that is where the majority of the code actually lies in the Shiny app. So it kind of gives you an overview of where the scope is. Now, if it's not completely clear, don't worry, we're going to come back to it. We're going to talk a little bit about what should you put in the various scopes. So in the global scope, you would want to put things like universal library calls. Let's say you love dplyr. So you're going to use it throughout your UI and your server and your support functions to do things, right? So that would be a great library call to stick in global. But maybe you have a charting library that you only need in a very specific situation. Then it wouldn't need to go in global. You would also put things like static variables, static data sets, connection pools in the global scope, because those are things that don't change. And you have to be really careful in this scope because it can cause environmental pollution. For instance, if you define an X variable in this scope, you can see it and change it throughout your entire app. So that can be really dangerous if somebody doesn't realize there's an X in the global scope and then uses X and doesn't get the scoping right. So, I always say use a naming standard. If you're going to actually declare global items, you should name them in a specific way. I like G underscore, but that's just my personal preference. But if you use a naming standard in your apps, you will find that it'll make it much more obvious when you're using a global variable. So the server global scope is very similar, and it would hold things like common functions or connections as well. Anything static that doesn't change based on a user's input. And again, you have to be careful because of pollution. So we get to the session local scope, and this is the one where everything else goes. So pretty much everything goes in session local. It's most of your code, and it's called a reactive context, if you've heard that term. It's limited to one session of an application, and you should always use the most restricted scope possible, because so you can kind of think of this as a pyramid with the smallest things going at the top and the biggest things going at the bottom. And luckily, since most things go in session local, you don't have to think too much about scoping on a general basis, because you're going to generally code in local, and then you're going to make decisions about what to move into global scopes. So the other thing I needed to do is, now we've mentioned it a couple times, the enterprise. And so I wanted to say, what do I mean by an enterprise application? A lot of people haven't seen an enterprise level Shiny application, because I can tell you there's not a lot of examples out there, because by the time you make something this big, it's usually very proprietary. However, I was fortunate enough to be able to release this, a version of this application that we developed for Bristol Myers. And so it gives us a great example of what is an enterprise application on the web. You can actually go out to GitHub and get the code for this app, run it on your local machine, look at all of the code, see how it works, try and debug it. And actually get your hands into an enterprise application. So I am super thrilled to share this with you. So it's called the single cell viewer. To just kind of give you a rundown of what some of the kind of complications that we had in this app. The data set is very wide and very tall. It is a app based on genomics data. It needed filtering and segregation on both rows and columns, which complicates things. And the application handles a large variety of data sets from different data sources that are prepared differently. We also, in this app, you'll notice you get to see it, and you can even touch and feel that we have it hosted. It was needed to visualize a large number of points interactively on the charts. And we're not going to talk about it in this talk, but if you're ever interested, Todd and I do give a talk on Canvas Express, which is a complimentary package that we maintain. It handles these types of charts very nicely. So I'll give you the reference for that at the end as well. So there was also a large variety of charts and number of charts, and there was an interactive analysis that was necessary. And anytime you do an interactive analysis in Shiny, that can be really tricky because the user expects things to be instantaneous because it's a web app. But we all know that there are some things that we can do fast and some things that take a little bit longer. And then, of course, that performance considerations. Now, this is a very large application, and it is working with very large data sets. So one of the things that I see is, these general statements on the web that your application should work this fast, right? This many milliseconds is the most that a user should wait. Well, that doesn't balance the performance with the needs, right? So when using an application like this, keep in mind it is going to feel a bit slower than Twitter. Which is working with tiny bits of data. And so, when you develop an application, you sometimes have to make trade-offs. And so there are some trade-offs with this. So I'm going to show you some screenshots, but I will show you the actual live app at the demo that we'll get to. So you can go out and touch and feel this. It's called the single cell viewer. And for those that aren't biologically inclined, and I'm not a biologist, like I mentioned, my background is in computational chemistry, but essentially what they do, so if you are a biologist and I explain this in a simple way, please excuse my explanation, but what they do is they take a tumor or something, in this case, I believe it's skin cancer, and they take apart the cells that are part of that tumor, and then they genomically sequence every cell. And so there's a sample of like 50,000 cells. And then, of course, the genome can be between 20 and 50,000 genes as well. So that's kind of when you're looking at wide and tall data, that's what you're looking at in this application. Just to kind of show you, there's charts. These are all interactive charts. There's tables. There's charts that have multiple facets. Right, all different types of charts, very large heat maps, and then an interactive analysis where you can pick two sets of cells and actually get a differential expression for those cells. So it's a big application from that standpoint. So I wanted to kind of give you an idea of what we're aiming for, right? So when you're aiming for these bigger applications that are shared. Now, Periscope is not only for big applications, it is great for tiny applications as well. And so what I'm going to do is show you about the package. So in order to facilitate these applications, this package was developed internally at Bristol Myers, and then it was allowed to be released into open source. So it's been on CRAN a number of years now. It is a framework for developing robust Shiny applications. And I always say, what isn't it? Because I think this is important. It's not a panacea for all of your application issues, problems, or difficulties, right? This is built to address a specific set of problems. It also isn't a substitute for planning your application or thinking about what goes in which scope, but it will make it much easier. It helps by reducing the boilerplate coding, which means like that reinventing the wheel for some very common items. It creates a consistent UI experience for the end user when you get to using it in a department. It helps with your scaling and scoping, and when you go to deploy multi-user applications. And that's a huge plus. If you've ever struggled to deal with scoping and scaling issues, you deploy it and two people use it at the same time and wonky stuff happens for both of them. So you should give it a try. It is made to be flexible so that your content is not affected. Your content can be as simple or, like I showed, as complicated as you need. It is fully documented. It has our help and vignettes and even an example app. And there's a template utility that will create an empty working Shiny application so you can actually get started on putting your content into the application, not on figuring out what's my title, how do I lay this out, oh, now I need to know how to make a button, right? There's all those things that you can skip and you can start focusing on, I'm going to stick a chart in this app. I'm going to stick a data table. I'm going to think about how my user's using it instead of just the framework. It's also an actively maintained package. This isn't an older abandoned package. In fact, we are now working on the next major update to this package, and I'm excited about that. So you should give it a try. I really hope you do after this talk. So some of the conveniences in this framework, there are 3 Shiny modules. There's something called download file. It is a button. It has both single and multiple styles, like where the drop-down pops out, I'll show you. And it has automatic tooltips. You don't have to style it, set the drop-downs, anything like that. There's something called downloadable table, and it is a wrapper around a DT where you have full table searching and reactive row selection. So if you have ever struggled to get which row of your table got selected, this completely solves that problem. Downloadable plot. So for plot packages like ggplot or lattice, grob, superclasses of those, it's not easy. There's not a lot of on chart controls to make the chart downloadable, download the data with the chart, and things like that. So we've made that available as well. So there's downloadable plot. But that's not it. It's not just these 3 modules. There's a whole bunch of other things. There's a busy and wait indicator for longer operations. There are tooltips that are easy. There are standard alerts. So there's 3 locations, so your users know where to keep an eye out for things that have gone wrong. And that can be really helpful. Easily URL parameter fetching, although Shiny has made that easier recently. There's a reset button that's built in along with a cancel functionality. And there's logging. So something enterprises often want is to understand who is accessing what data, for instance. And so you can log actions inside of this framework, and that's all set up for you. You can even show it on the app if you want. And it will look just as good on your iPad as it does on your computer. And then, of course, we have expanded this over time. It started out as a left sidebar only. And so now you can have a left sidebar, you can have a right sidebar, you can have both or none. So that is the first set of slides. So let me see where we're at. Lisa, I think I'm going to get into the demo and then we can have a break. Is that all right?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
If it's okay, maybe we can open up some questions if anybody
Oh,
wants
absolutely,
to
absolutely.
ask anything. Yeah.
I don't
For
see
sure.
that screen at the same time, so I apologize.
No worries. Yeah, I had a couple questions actually, if it was
Sure,
okay.
absolutely.
And if anybody has any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat. So I guess one question that I had was like developing something at the scale from the ground up that you know is going to be used in an enterprise setting. There's this huge idea of sort of like CI/CD kind of development, or just like user testing and trying to kind of accommodate all of those different types of scenarios and use cases. How was like your approach to that? Because it can take up your entire, time developing if you're over it. Yeah.
Yeah, it can. So Shiny apps are not terribly well structured to fit into CI. They've made leaps and bounds in the latest versions of Shiny. So this framework does not address testing. Specifically, but from an application standpoint, in my experience, we use an iterative development at our company. So pieces and parts are developed one, at a time, and an enterprise application, even that should grow. Gone are the days where like there's this massive 45-page spec that they throw at you, and it's got every button and line and a wireframe, right? These applications grow out of need. And so a lot of times you can just work iteratively on it, right? You start with the first tab and what you want to show, and then you take and get feedback from your users, and then you iterate on it. And these are very long-lived applications, years and years and years in an enterprise, versus something that I've seen Shiny used a lot for, and that's more like research group results and grad schools and classes where it's very short-lived application, right? So you have to take the long view with testing. Where it makes sense and things are stable, I highly suggest using the built-in Shiny test framework, right? It's built on Selenium, and it does the automated clicking for you and things like that. But that in and of itself also has its own problems. So it's not a question that's completely answered yet. And I hate to say that, but it is always something that we do struggle with, but there's a lot of manual effort that goes into testing Shiny applications that are that big. I mean, just to be really honest.
Yeah, that's awesome. And thank you so much for answering that. I think that was like a very realistic and great answer, because I know that it can be a small team and, developing our applications. Not everybody always has time to work on it consistently and always. And so you have to kind of weigh in like, what can we put our time into optimizing and what can't we? So yeah, I guess one other question that I had was whether or not sort of this worked out of the box with a lot of the like aesthetic Shiny applications that come out, like sort of like the different themes that come out. Everybody wants to make their Shiny applications.
That is the big update we are making to it now.
Yeah.
So we are making a breaking update. We needed to wait a couple of versions, because in an enterprise they tend to be behind on the versions that are adopted. Everything from R to Excel, right?
Yeah.
And so we were waiting because we knew it would be a breaking change. And so we're working on the 1.x version, which is the next one, but it will break, once you create an application we're going to go to the new Shiny modules. We're going to use BSlib and do the styling that way. Yes. So there are some limited options for styling right now, but since it is the older version, they're limited.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for answering my questions.
No problem. Yeah. Anything else? Nothing?
Not from me. If people have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat throughout, and we'll make sure to ask them to Connie when she gets a chance.
Okay, excellent. Well, let me reshare. I'm going to share something more exciting than PowerPoint. Huh, it doesn't have my other screen on it. That's so interesting. There we go. Okay. It's like, which window? You should see something called the Periscope example application gallery. Is that what you guys are seeing?
Yep, yes. We're seeing your entire desktop, yeah.
Oh, you're seeing my whole desktop. That's not helpful. That's a big screen. So let me try again. There we go. That should be better.
Yes.
Okay. It is no longer an eye test. Okay. So we have a website that's put up with, we have some example applications hosted on a small Shiny server. This is not an enterprise setup or meant for heavy use in any way, but it is up here so that you can see these running applications even before you set them up. And this is that single cell viewer I was discussing. And the links to the GitHub and everything will be in the resource slide. And just to show you it running here, here is this application. And for instance, this charting library lets you do a whole bunch of different things to these charts, and you can go through and create them yourself and explore some of your genes and things like that. And so this is a fully functioning application. Oh, I didn't push the button. And oops, here we go. And make some of these big heat maps. Explore some of this and some of these charting libraries as well. This is that Canvas Express library I mentioned, but this is a framework, and it is intended to let you do your content as you need it. And this is the left sidebar application, and you can see here. There we go. It is it does actually have a left sidebar. So when we go through the framework, this is that version of application, and that was the original intention. So this will be out there for people to explore, and then here we are. So we've got code. This is much better. So Periscope has been on CRAN for quite some time, so you can install it right from CRAN. The current version of it is 0.63. Like I mentioned, the 1.x version will be the one that we upgrade to using BSlib now that it's out on CRAN, and it's well supported, and we are on 4.1. So there will be a big update coming, which is exciting, but it will work in essence largely the same way. So I hope you'll give it a try, even though there's an update coming. I'm always hesitant to be like, there's an update coming, but still give it a try. It's still very, very much worthwhile. So this is easy to get up and running with, and that was really our intention. You can create a new application that is blank, and you can create a sample application. So I'm going to do both here. I'm just going to create two, and you literally call create a new application. You give it a name. So here I've given it blank underscore left, and you give it a location. I'm just doing it right here in my folder. Oh yes, I do actually have to source the library. So you'll see here sample underscore L is that application. And then I'm going to create a blank one here. So one, I've added this sample app is equal to true. And this is what lets me show you the sample application. So there's a fully functional sample application it will create for you on your local drive. And that demonstrates the various features of the framework. If you want right sidebar as well, you can add right sidebar here, and that's using Shiny Dashboard Plus, if you're curious under the hood. If you want no sidebars, you can also do that. Just say the left sidebar is false. So that would give you a blank, which means, you know, when I say none here, it means no sidebars. So, so I created these two left sidebar examples in the time where we were talking here. Really no delay at all. So when I say you can get up and running right away, so here's this blank underscore L folder I created. In that folder, I have a fully functional application that is blank and waiting for content. So I can start to put things right here. I don't have to do terribly much to get it set up, but this doesn't make for a great demo, and it's not particularly exciting yet. So let me show you something else. So I want to show you the sample application. If you have not, I have run into a lot of people who don't know this trick. You can push this run button up here in our studio, but all this run button does on a Shiny application is this command, run app. And I just made two applications in folders. So I can't just run an app. I have to tell it which one. So from this working directory, the 2021-07 Vancouver, I'm just in this directory. If I run app with the name of that folder, it will know it's a Shiny application and will start it. So that's all I have to do to run it. So it's a great way if you've got a bunch of Shiny applications and you're working or different versions, or you're just testing stuff out and you want to try something. You can have folders and each application is in its own folder, and then you can just run them like this without having to change your working directory or go open a file. So you can run it this way, or you can go into this main global file. What I'm going to do is show you the demo first, and then we'll come back and I'll walk you through the code. So let's go ahead and start this up. So this is the sample application that comes as a part of the package and is created when you say sample is true. Now, it is customized for whether you have a left, right, or no sidebars, or both. So the example itself actually goes with what you have created, but it will look very, very similar. I will run you through a couple features just so you're aware of where to go look for them. So you immediately see this is a dashboard styled application. And if you had no sidebars, it would look a lot like this. But it would still have this title, and it would still have this spot over here to the left. And the reason for that is that actually there's a wait indicator in that spot. So see this show application busy indicator button? If I hit this, here's this indicator up here. Now this is built into the framework, so you don't have to. I had to put a button because this application is very small. But when you're working in a bigger application like single cell viewer, you will see that this comes up if it's waiting. You know, if you do a calculation in the application and it's waiting, it automatically detects that Shiny is waiting and puts up the indicator. So you don't have to code a bunch of CSS around your items saying that they're working, so that your user knows where to go to see if it's working on something. So beyond that, there's a title up here at the top. I've got a zoom thing in the way. There we go. We've got our title at the top. It says click for an info pop-up. So this is a very popular feature This is just an HTML file, and it comes up in a window, and you can use any valid HTML code, and it's a great place to put your author attribution, any copyrights, links, things like that. So these pop-ups I found are very well received. And then your user knows where to go to get help, or find out who the app author is, right? And you don't have to take up your valuable real estate putting that information on the screen, or hiding it somewhere. There are in the left sidebar. So the left sidebar has two tabs, basic and advanced. You don't have to have both. If you don't have one, it will just have no tabs. But in the advanced tab, there is a reset button. So this is a great button. If you have a very complicated app, you might say, well, I'll just refresh my app. But there may be things you actually need to do when you reset it. There may be setup that needs to be called again that can't. It just doesn't happen if you just refresh your browser, right? Connections may need to be revalidated, single sign-on, things like that. So if you hit this reset button, this is part of the framework. It will warn you, and then you can cancel it if you want. Or if you let it go, it will reset the application. And so this is on the advanced tab. And you can either have a reset button or not. That's also an option. This brings up the next demoable item, and that is a consistent location for your warnings and alerts for your user. So one of the things, the feedback that we get from users as the applications become more complicated, they get more confused about where to look to know when something has actually gone wrong, or when there's feedback, right, about what they've put into various things. And this isn't a substitute for maybe your validation for various fields on the field, or things that are very specific, but this is a great place to show an alert, and you get all of the bootstrap colors. You've got your red, orange, yellow, for when things are going wrong, or when there's information about a data set they need to know, or when you've got anything you need to tell your users. This is great. So you can have it come all the way across the top. You can have them on either of the sidebars, and if you create a right sidebar application, there's also a location for that. So you can put some alerts where your users will know to look for them, and that's fairly common, and is very, very well used for us. So that is built in. You literally create an alert, give it a location and content, and it will put it in the right place for you. And then you can make them either append to each other or only show one, right? So no matter how many times I push this body button, it's not going to build up. The download file is that button I was telling you about, a module, and it has two different styles. So it is a single download or a multiple download. And so this is when there's only one thing to download. It looks like this. And if there's more than one choice, then it looks like this button. So your users always know what this button means. And then if they click this button, they get their options for their download that you've set up. There's a downloadable table, and in true spirit of using our own functionality, it has incorporated in this module a download file button that will change between single and multiple. If you only want to let your user download one type of data, it'll only show as a single, but multiple, it will deal with your data and let them download it in whichever way you want. These are great versus just downloading or copy and pasting the table, because you can actually make a different data set available for download versus what's displayed. So this box can have a completely different display from what is being downloaded here. And that can be used to obfuscate the data. It can be used to give the user more data. So maybe you only want to display some of the columns, but they want to download the entire data set. Or you can use it to filter data for specific users or specific reasons. So that's the downloadable table module. Now the box around it is just a box I put around it for convenience. So then we get into the plots, and we've got downloadable plots. And again, here's that button. We're always using our own constructs, so I feel that's really important. And so this ggplot, right? We've got a great ggplot here, but it's a pain to download it. You can right click on it and save it as an image, but maybe I want to give a better version of it, or I want to give a higher resolution one than what I'm showing here. You can grab it here and say, hey, here's the JPEG for it. Now in this button, I also allowed it to download the data set. So now I can get my data set right with my ggplot. Same thing for lattice. And then this button can be put in any of the four corners, either outside or inside the plot. If you have a plot like this one where there's nothing in this corner, you can just overlap the plot. And you'll see this one is in various image formats, PNG and TIFF. And then the data formats can be multiple ones, text or TSV. And then that all important, boring, but very, very necessary logging. So if you use, the loggers are all set up. So all you have to do is say log and then debug or info, and then you just put your message. You can use your favorite parameterization function. You can use glue, you can use paste. And then the logger is already set up and is at the top of every file. So you can use things like info, debug, warn, or error. And I'll show you where those files go. And then if you choose to show it in your application, you will see the things that the user that you have chosen to log as the application owner. So this is not automatically logging everything in the application. What it does is it logs what you tell it to log. So in this application, I have logged the various actions, right? If you hit a body alert, if you download something, you know, keeping track of things like downloads. So if I grab this ggplot, it will file downloaded in browser and what the plot name is. So you can choose to log what's important to your organization or application. You may not even show this to the user. A lot of times what we'll do is we'll have a feedback button and we'll just attach the log to it as just an additional piece of information when a user asks a question. You know, where did they get to and how did they get there? Had they been using the app for 2.5 hours and then it died? Well, okay. Or did they use it for 2 minutes and they did 3 things and it had a problem, right? It helps us debug. So that is that can be very helpful. So this is the sample application kind of demonstrating from a UI standpoint the functionality, and I'm going to pause before I get into code and see if there's questions before I get off the screen. Any questions? I see something in the chat. Oh, there we go, the portal. Yes. And it will be on the slides as well, the link to the portal. The portal itself also has a hosted version. So if you, for some reason, are away from your R or you want to just look at a hosted version, you can just load them up right here. And this one actually has that right sidebar on it. And I can show you the alert for it. It's in this top box, sidebar right. And if we open that sidebar, there's that alert. This one's styled a little differently because this is a Shiny Dashboard Plus sidebar. But again, you can have your tabs, and this demonstrates how to create those tabs and make them interactive. And what we did is just made them turn on and off the plots. So if you see, there's no more ggplot. Any other questions before I get into the code? And Lisa, this might be a good time for a quick break.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same.
Okay, excellent. Let me stop my sharing then. And I believe I've stopped my sharing.
So why don't we take about 10 minutes? Yeah.
Okay. We'll be back here in 10 minutes then. Anyway, so let's look at the code. You know, where is the code? What does it look like? And what's different about it than your 2-app Shiny app? Okay, so coming into the RStudio session, so just reorienting myself here. I did want to point out that the package application, the package information includes the vignettes. You can always view a package's documentation if you're on any page of the docs. Let's say you just remember one function, you can always hit this index button. I think it's not as obvious as it should be. But then this takes you to all the documentation for the package. And for every package, you don't even have to install it to view the documentation. You can go out to CRAN and it's pre-built. The vignettes and everything are all out there. And the documentation is available as a PDF. So you can check out the documentation. If you're curious to kind of walk back through that new application, there's a vignette on creating a new framework-based application that does a lot of that walkthrough that we just did. So you feel free to check that out. Okay, that's all I'll say about help. So let's look at the apps we made. So we'll look at the sample app, and you'll notice when you come into this directory, it looks a lot like a Shiny app. It's got global, server, and UI. These files, oops, I just let somebody else in. So Lisa, I'm not sure if I'm the only one that can let people in, but I just clicked accidentally. I think we're good.
I think we're okay. Well, if somebody tries to rejoin or anything like that, we should be able to welcome back. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So in this directory, there are, I'm just going to close my working file. There's a global, a server, and a UI file. And I'm going to open these three up. And they all three say this: do not edit this file. So these are the framework files. So this is what's starting to run the framework, which is behind the scenes, and interacts with the package itself. So these three files, though they look familiar, they all have at the top, don't edit this file. So these aren't actually where you're going to do any coding at all. So the big difference between a regular Shiny application and using the framework is that there's this program directory. So we have a log directory, and this is where the log actions are held and then rolled over once. So if you, for some reason, need to get to the last one, you can. But you can see here, it's just a text file holding these logs that we did in our application. So we've got a log directory and we've got this program directory. And then the www directory holds the assets. So you won't work in here either. But almost everything you do is going to be, in fact, everything you do is going to be in this program directory. You really won't touch anything outside of it. So we've set up some folders just for your convenience. There's a data folder. And in the example application, it holds the CSV file. And it has a git ignore by default. I point that out. If you use git, you really shouldn't check your data in. But if for some reason you have like a reference data set and you want to check it in, you can add it to the git ignore. So this is pre-set up for you. And these are just suggested organizing folders. The function folder is a great place to put your extra R files with your functions in it, like for instance, plots. And as your application becomes much more complicated, you will use a lot of helper files for a lot of these extra functions, right? So in this example, I've separated out the plots. This is all the plotting functions for the three plots that are shown. And then helpers is things like loading data functions. So just to show you a separation of concerns. So that's just those folders are pre-set up for you in the framework, even when it's blank. And then you have the familiar global, server, and UI files. Now they're slightly different. You'll notice here, this is the global file is global.r. That's it. It is a global file. And in it, you'll notice all of these files have headers that say kind of what is the scope of the file. So if you forget, and kind of what you should use it for, what the suggested use is. So you'll see here in this global.r, we've got a global import. So like I mentioned, if you're using your dplyr everywhere, put your dplyr here. These are these global imports. You use glue everywhere, source your glue package here. And then there's this function called set app parameters. And this is where the app title is set. You just come in here, change the title. This is that title info. I've just put some basic HTML in a string. You could read it in from a file, but it is literally just HTML. You set your log level, like what log level do you want to see? And then an app version. And I do suggest you version your apps. And a package is a great way to do that, but this is a way for you to manually version your apps. This is not used for anything in the package. It is just if you're working on version 1.0 of an app, 1.1, 1.2, 2.0, right? Maybe you have them deployed in multiple places, and this will let you keep track of that. Just a place to keep track of it. So that's the global file. Not a lot in this app here, and in most apps, there's not a lot in this file because, again, that global scope is very, very precious, and you should be very careful with it. So in that light, there's also a server global scope. And again, this is a global type of scope just for the server. So it'll give you a short breakdown of what the use is and give you some of those warnings. And then you'll see here, I've decided to read this CSV file in here. And you might say, well, why did you read the CSV file in this scope? Well, this is a reference data set. Nobody's going to change it. And so I don't want to read it in every time someone connects to my app. I just want to read it in once and show it to everybody. So in order to do that, I put it in the server global scope, and you'll notice I prefix anything in server global with SG, and this is just my personal preference and what we do in our team. And then I've read this file in this scope. So this variable is available to the local scope and the server global scope, and we will use it somewhere else as well. So you'll see it. Oops, I still have my app running here. Okay, so this is a server global variable, just as an example. And I've even put an important note in here, right? I tried to put notes in to the example application where necessary on why I put this here. And then we get into the ubiquitous server local. This is where the majority of your code goes. And again, there's this header on this. And you might say, oh, you know, I don't need these headers, but you should at least look and see what framework variables you get. So this is the things that are exposed in this file from the framework. Your input, your output, and your session. These are Shiny variables. And then this is the name of your log. And so this is that logger's name. So this is that variable that you can use to log things. And this is the typical Shiny code you're used to looking at, right? So this is the file things like render UI go into. This is the file that your outputs go into. You'll see this output example plot one goes here, right? And this is where your render statements are. So you're able to code your Shiny application if you're experienced with Shiny apps the same way you did before, putting the things that you would have put inside that server function right here. In fact, we convert apps a lot by taking an existing app's code and moving the parts and pieces into these files where they should go. You'll notice here there's this log info. So I mentioned it's easy to log things. This is log info. And this is that line that you saw in the log. And so it's just that easy. Anywhere you want to log something, someone pushes a button, you want to log it, you just use this log info. I'm just looking for if I have anything else logged in this file. I don't. Now these items here, just take a second. These are the modules. So for like when I show that button, that example download button, this is the ID for that button. And this is just a standard old style module. I have to stay old style now because they did change the paradigm slightly, ostensibly to make it more obvious, but I think it actually makes it a little bit more obscure, but that's just my opinion on it. So this is the traditional Shiny call module. And so you give it the ID, you give it the name of the module, you give it the logger so that your modules can log as well. This is the file name prefix. So like if somebody's downloading something, it'll come down as example single, and that's the prefix for it. And then you give it a list of what you want to export. So this download file button is going to let you download a CSV that comes from this function. This load data one is just a function or a reactive expression, and it's the name of it. And so it is not called yet. You don't put the parentheses on it. So it's not yet been called, right? It is just the name of the function, similar to how you send the name of the module. And then if you want multiple things to download, you can see here, this is a CSV, an XLS, and a TSV, and I'm actually sending it the same data. All the data has to give this is a matrix or a table, data frame output, and the button itself will change it into the different formats and export it properly for your user. And then when I combine outputs, you'll see here, this is that ggplot we demoed, and the JPEG is going to come from this plot, and then the CSV comes from a function called plot2 ggplot data, and then the visible plot is the same function. And so again, you can have the same function for your downloads or a different one. Maybe you need to watermark your plot when somebody downloads it for copyright reasons. That's fairly common. And so you would have the visible plot in your application without a watermark. and then the user would download it and it would have a watermark. So these are those modules that you see in use, and this is how they're used. And oh, here's a log info. So you'll see here in this observe event, if I push this button, this busy indicator button, it logs this info. And that's it. That's all I have to do to log it. So throughout my application, I can easily log things and then get to them later if I need to, like I said, to email them or whatnot. And they're in that log folder. You just read the file. Or you can use the logger itself to export it. So that's your server local file. So this is the reactive scope. So this is the generally the main place you're going to put your reactive functionality. And then we have two UI files. You're like, oh, two UI files. UI files are divided by the location that they are in the application. I'm not sure what I changed, but I don't think I want to save that. So we have, in this application, we have the UI body and the UI sidebar. Now, the application traditionally was built for a left sidebar, and so UI sidebar implies left. And if you had a right sidebar, it would have UI underscore sidebar underscore right. So you would have 3 locations if you had both sidebars. And if you had no sidebars, you would just have this UI body. So let's look at the UI body. So this is a place where you're going to create your body elements. And so you'll see here, I'm just using shiny dashboard boxes to kind of organize the application. I like them personally. A lot of my applications use them. And I'm just building my content. And you'll notice I'm assigning it to variables. And there's a reason for this. So I can assign as many elements as I want to variables here. And then the one different thing that I have to do, and this is very small, but you do have to do it, is you have to list them in the order they're shown in the UI. So whether you make one element and that's your whole body, let's say you're great at laying things out with fluid rows and columns, and you're just going to take that whole element and shove it in here, that's fine. Or you can, create things one at a time, or you may have dynamic applications, and that's actually the reason for this. You may have dynamic applications where which parts of your application show depend on something. For instance, the user logged in. They may or may not have access to certain parts of your application, and so then you can dynamically only create the parts that you need, if that's the case. So this add UI body here is the call you have to make, and you just list the UI elements that you're going to put in. That's it. And if for some reason you want to call this multiple times, you can append them to the current list. So let's say maybe later the user does something and they need to change their list of elements, you can append more, and that's not a problem. Or you can replace them. So this is standard UI code, right? There's nothing exciting here other than the fact that you have to register these elements. Now it works the same way in each of these files that are UI named. So these are that UI scope, and you'll see here this UI sidebar right, sidebar.r. So it's a left sidebar. And I created one element here for the left sidebar, and I just stuck it in this add UI sidebar, and we've got a basic and an advanced here. If you don't register anything, what will happen is that sidebar won't show up. And that's perfectly fine, and that may be actually what you want. So let's say I run my application. Which one do I have open? So you'll see here now there's no advanced tab, right? So there's no tabs. So if you don't register something into the second sidebar tab, it will just not have that second tab. So if you just want a simple left sidebar, that's easy enough to do. You just don't put anything in there or register anything into that tab. So we were in UI sidebar. And what did I do? All I did was comment this out. So add UI sidebar advanced. Now, if you send it an empty list, it will make that tab for you. Maybe you need to put something on it later. So those are the registrations. And that is largely the difference from developing a a regular Shiny app. So it's the location of the code. We are coming into this program directory, and then these are divided by scope. And so instead of having to think all about scope and where exactly things go, you can be like, okay, I am going to make a decision about where to read certain things. Like let's say I have a really big reference data set. I'm going to put it in a server global scope, because that way it's read for as few times as possible, right? The first user that comes in, it will have to read it for, but then every user after that that connects to the same global controller, like let's say you're using RS Connect, will get that data set and not have to wait for it to get downloaded and read in again. And so you can make decisions about where to put things, but you can basically work in the server local file and in the UI files, just the same as you work in a Shiny app. So our goal when we created this was really to not stymie the creativity or the usability of Shiny. You know, we wanted to make a framework that provided some of those helpers that are used all over the place, provides the users with some consistency on the applications, right? But at the same time, whether you have 15 charts in it, or you have an application that's simpler or more complex, when we have these other applications, the user still knows where to go to look for help or issues, where to get information to go back to the app author with this pop-up. They know where the waiting bar is, and they know in general how the application is going to tell them about problems. So, you know, and these tables work similarly, the buttons work similarly. It really provides you with less, you don't have to spend as much time training your users on how to use your app every time. But as you can see, this application looks very different from the sample application, which looks very different from a lot of these applications. So we're trying to provide you with a framework to jumpstart your application so that you can get it out into the hands of your users and get that feedback and keep building it, and building it in a safe way. When you deploy this app, if you have properly, you know, if you've kind of followed the guidelines here and you've put these items in the right locations, I mean, and honestly, this is the only reactive scope, is this server local. So you have to put your observe events here, and your module calls and your reactivities. So this is your reactive scope. This provides those guardrails so that when you deploy it to a server and 100 people use it at once, it is not going haywire. And that is really the beauty for this, without telling you how to make your app or what you can put in it. You can still put anything in it. You can rely on any library you need. And so that gives you that flexibility. That is the end of my demo. But before I get off the code, I do want to see if there's questions. I know we kind of jumped right back into code after a break, so there might be. I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Lisa, do you have anything?
No.
Okay. Okay, so let me pop back to my slides and a new share. PowerPoint, are you seeing my PowerPoint?
Yep.
Excellent.
That's good.
Okay, so just a recap on the content locations and scoping, and really the differences from a traditional Shiny application. Your content always goes under that program subdirectory. And this is really critical because those files above that level are part of the framework. If you change them, it may not work correctly. And so just keep your code in the program subdirectory. And each framework file contains a header on whether and how it should be used. I suggest you leave them in there for future developers. It also tells you what variables are available in your various scopes. The global content is available to the entire application. Global.r really should be used very, very sparingly, and server global.r, you should think very hard about what you're putting in there. These should be things that are static. Users should not update things that are in those scopes because unexpected things happen. UI content is divided by location, and you'll have up to 3 of these files. UI body is always the main part of the application. UI sidebar is the left, UI sidebar right is the right sidebar, and you add the items in a list to this one function at the bottom. And that's for each UI example. And then the server content, again, is divided by scope. You have global and local, and really you're going to use local for anything that's mutable, anything that's non-static between users, right? So most of your code will go here because most of the things you want to have happen in your application are one user based. Those are those interactive items. I do want to mention a couple of other tools. We've gotten into a few with the questions, but just to give you some thoughts about where to go for some things that will really help, and just from my enterprise experience. So Canvas Express is the charting library that is shown in those examples on the Periscope example website. And it can handle millions of points on a chart. It's got a very rich on-chart interface. It's not what this talk is about, so I'm not going to go into it. But it is very actively maintained and still very much in use, and very, very rich. You know, if you're ever frustrated trying to code tooltips for ggplot, I suggest you take a look at Canvas Express. And you know, if you've ever done a plot with 20,000 points on it in Plotly, you know how slow that can be. So I suggest you check it out. Test That is great for automated tests. As your apps become more complicated, you may want a test suite, especially for your functions that are not related to the UI. Of course, Shiny has started to build in Shiny Test as well. Future, for background things that must be done by the application but are time consuming, it's a great construct. And when you use it right, it can't be used for everything. There are things that cannot do or pass across, things like database connections and whatnot. But Future is a great way to do things in the background for your Shiny app. Let's say loading data for other tabs, for instance. Maybe you have to load the data for the tab that comes up when the user enters your application, but maybe the rest of your data you could load later. Pool, if you're not familiar with this is a package for handling connections, for instance, database connections. So if you use things like databases, the actual setup of the connection and the negotiation that happens there is the longest part of using that external data source. And so it's like the slowest thing you can do. It's often much slower than even pulling your data, unless your data is really big. And so Pool helps with that, because every time you make and disconnect and make and disconnect and make and disconnect one of those connections, you are very, very slowly doing that. So Pool is a great package to deal with that. And we've had great success with it. And then I always point this out, but you are the biggest factor for your own success. So your flexibility, thinking about what your problem is and what you're solving with your Shiny app, right? And being flexible. Not all problems can or should be solved the same way. There's no one panacea for large data in a Shiny app. There's no one solution that meets every business need. If you're trading on the stock market, you have real-time data needs. If you're working in the biological realm, maybe you have a more laid back experience, right? Where you don't need that real-time data. The technologies you use and how you solve your business problems should be flexible. And you may have to try several different things. So I just thought I'd point those out. And then I do give a bunch of resources, and I will pass these slides, of course, to the organizers to pass out or post along with the recording on YouTube. The Periscope, there's another tutorial on Periscope. It's part of the Use Our conference from this last year. It includes Canvas Express. If you're curious about that, that's that tutorial. And then, of course, the single cell viewer. I've also given you the link to the code and the publication that went with that single cell viewer. If you are into biology nerddom, you can check that out and read about it. Canvas Express, I suggest you check it out. It's another package that we maintain. We maintain the R package for it. It's actually a JavaScript library that does a lot of this type of stuff on the chart. So like literally when you put up a big chart, Canvas Express actually does calculations on the page and on the chart. So you're not going back and forth to the server. We have a blog post. It's old, but it's still very, very valid about scoping. So if you want to read more about scoping in R and Shiny, whoops. You might check this blog post out. You can check out our company if you're interested here. We are also hiring Shiny developers if you're somebody who loves to make Shiny apps. Right now, that's really what we need. So if you're interested in that, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or directly by email, and we can set up a time to talk. And of course, I have not done this in a vacuum. I gratefully acknowledge Bristol Myers for allowing us to release this externally, and for supporting this package and using it. It gets great use. And for all of our team members at Aggregate Genius that have worked on this as well.